welcome to episode 5 of the Ruck Off with me, Elliot, and Stevie.
Yeah, new name. It's a new name every week.
And today we're joined by Benny Mitchell. How are we?
All right, thank you, chaps. How are you two?
Good as always.
Yeah, all right. Better seeing you.
Absolutely. Nice to see you keeping up standards with your haircut, Stephen.
So, Ben, do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself, a bit about your background, a bit about everything?
Yeah, so my involvement in rugby started a long time ago, back in 1997 at Colville Rugby Club, where I started in the mini and junior section. Played all the way through up to seniors, went off to university, played rugby at the Montfort and Edgehill University. Then, unfortunately, had to retire. That old cliche of I've got bad knees, which I genuinely do. And all throughout that as well, I've been coaching a lot of rugby. So that's my rugby life. In my personal life, I'm a property manager, which is really boring and very stressful. That's about it.
So how was I assume rugby at uni was probably the best time of your life.
I loved it. Loved it. So, I mean, the big thing, what I suppose a lot of people don't see is when you're at university, it's that family environment. Your boys you look after each other. You're in it all the time. You know, too much in my sort of experience, because I decided to do a lot more rugby and drinking beer than I did actual education, but had a great time. And it's just a different style of rugby. It's different to any other style of rugby that you play or coach in any other walk of life. It's quick, it's frantic, and everyone is passionate. Everyone's there for the same reason. Where in other amateur situations, I suppose, there are certain lads that are there just to be there, to be part of a club and have a social aspect. What I found at uni rugby was everyone was there and they were there to win. And it meant everything. It was the most important thing in your life when you were there.
Yeah. Do you obviously you had a short player career. We'll talk about the injury and coaching afterwards, but do you have a highlight of your playing career? What stands out?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me was one of our varsity games at Edgehill. So at Edgehill University, we had a bit of a tragic time, not to bring the sort of level down, but our coach unfortunately passed away in my third year. And it set a massive sort of ethos for us and a great base level of rugby. And in his memory, we went away to HAAWK and beat them in our varsity match, which was very emotional, but that will stay with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And what age did you retire from playing? And then why did you take up coaching?
So I was 25 when I retired. I had got bad knees, and when I went and got them sort of MRI'd and everything like that, got operated on. Turns out I had no meniscus left in my left knee, and it was basically a question of carry on doing more activity and have a knee replacement around the age of 30, or stop and preserve that. And obviously, as an amateur player, you've got to look at the longevity of normal life. So that's why I did that.
Yeah. Did you always want to do coaching after playing, or was it?
Well, my first taste of coaching was actually when I was doing my A-levels back in Loughborough. I was lucky enough to be sort of put onto a scheme called the Boost Scholarship Campaign. So Boost was something that ran alongside Loughborough University. I don't know if it's still going on, which was basically building on overlooked sports and talent, mainly in rugby. And they came into our school and they were coaching us and giving us bits as we were playing. And they then opened that up to a couple of lads, so myself and another fella, Liam. And that gave me a real taste for coaching. They put me through my level 1, it was back then. And they got me into schools and I loved it. I just loved being on the pitch. It gave me a completely different view of rugby itself. And that's where that started. So even though, I love playing, coaching has always been there for me. I've always wanted to do it. And although it was an easy transition from when I stopped playing, I was still coaching before I'd stopped playing. So it was really easy for me to fall into that.
What would you say your highlight of your coaching career is?
Coaching, I think there's been a couple. So it's a big one for me was, again, back at Edgehill. So through my time as playing, because I was part injured with my knees at Edghill, I picked up coaching during my second year, and started to move that on quite a way under Paul Reed, who was the fellow who unfortunately died. And when he passed, again, it was the HAAWK game. So it was a bit of a player coach role type of thing. And the boys worked really hard. And we used that basis that Paul put in place and those sort of coaching methodology and his ethos to be able to progress from being, a good side to being an excellent side, and being able to take his ideas and learn under his mold and then win that game, which meant so much. As a player and as a coach, it was unbelievable. As well, one of my most recent achievements, I think, was probably with Ashby Rugby Club, which was where I was coaching previously, where we'd gained promotion. And it was, I know that the team before I joined had got promotion previously, but we were really convincing, and we were good. I can honestly say that we were really good.
Is there any particular coach that you would say you're similar to in terms of like methods and stuff like that?
Are you talking like famous coaches or coaches that have influenced me, or?
Yeah, either, really.
Either. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've never been one of these coaches that like to think of being a really hard taskmaster. I think for me in coaching, the most important thing is engaging with your players and building an environment where they feel comfortable to communicate in a two-way process. So for me, when I read up and look at things like what Rob Baxter does down at Exeter, that is what I try and put myself under. Luckily enough, when I was doing another qualification, Paul Westgate was one of the mentors who was down at Exeter as well. And the way he described the environment that Rob Baxter had built over a period of time, that is someone that I look up to and I try to emulate. I think that is so important. If you can get the players to drive that mentality of wanting to win, wanting to make themselves better, and you create that environment, that's invaluable. And I just think it's just so important, in my opinion.
You look at like all like the top clubs, say Bristol, your Exeter, it's just all about culture, really. It's like what you said about Rob Baxter, Pat Lamb. They all have this goal and everyone buys into it. And I think that's where a lot of clubs can go wrong, because especially in like grassroots level, you can have players who want to play at a social level, or you can have players who want to play at a high level, and people don't buy into the same goal, so it becomes harder then for you.
And that's it. And that for me is one of the biggest challenges as being an amateur coach. You've got, and I'm sure it's across the same at any other amateur club. You've got players that are excellent, probably better than the standard that they're playing at. And then you've got those other players that are never really going to be quite good enough to play at first team level, or maybe even second team level. But what you've got to try and do is differentiate that coaching to accommodate all of them and get them all to engage in it. And that is so challenging. But for me, that's an enjoyable challenge, because it just provides so many other opportunities. There's coaching within coaching, getting your more senior players to coach your younger players, or getting your more experienced players to coach some of the younger coaches, and just, managing that situation. I think it's a challenge, but it's enjoyable.
I've like gone into a bit of like the amateur coaching stuff, and it's hard because you work in a day job, but then it's almost like another job on top of that, and majority of the time you don't get paid for it. So I think it's what like this level is where you find a lot of the most passionate coaches.
You have to have the drive, because when you've had a really, really stressful day at work, and then you've got to go and stand on a park with 20 lads when it's -2, and it's absolutely hammering it down, and all you really want to do is go home, have a beer and have something nice to eat. You've got to have that drive. And what I think a lot of players don't see at amateur level is the amount of planning and the amount of time that goes into building these sessions. I think it's easy to look at it and see that we just turn up and we just deliver the stuff that comes out of our mouths. But actually, behind the scenes, there's WhatsApp groups that are going off all the time, constantly, and all through the year, not just during the playing season, all through the year. And for me, it's a passion. You've got to be able to plan right to be able to deliver what you want. But I do think sometimes that sort of thing is taken for granted. So without that drive, it's impossible.
What would you say? So it's going to be post lockdown, post COVID, rugby's back. What is a day in the life of Ben on a Saturday?
So for me, I mean, I'm lucky enough that I've just joined a new club at HAAWK. So the way I see it is, I'm living in Liverpool as it stands. So I'll wake up, probably watch Soccer AM because I love it. Funny. Get a nice breakfast under my belt, and then for me, I like to get to the club early. So for me, it'll be getting to HAAWK, getting there and doing the fine details, so getting the shirts hung up, getting out on the pitch and laying out whatever we've planned for the warm up, and just getting everything set in my mind. Even though I'm not playing anymore, I still have like a weird routine that I like to do things and get set before we get out on the pitch. And then for me, it's enjoying the stress of that game. It sounds a strange thing to say, but I just love it. There's no feeling like it.
What is HAAWK? So describe HAAWK for people who may have never, like the rugby club, for people who have never heard of them before.
So for me, HAAWK is a complete breath of fresh air. It's a club up in the north, obviously, in West Lancashire. The boys that I've managed to sort of get contact with in the few sessions that I've had, obviously due to COVID, are unbelievable. What you need at amateur rugby is a group of lads that are willing to drive themselves, not the coaches trying to push them to push themselves. And this is what I found with these lads. They will probably be the first to admit that not all of them are the most talented rugby players, but what they are is willing, and they're willing to learn. And I can't ask for any more. And on the backside of it, I've heard that their social element of life is unbelievable. So I'm a little bit apprehensive, but I'm also looking forward to that.
The rugby side is obviously important at this level, but I think the social side is equally or more so as important. What do you think of that?
Totally agree. I think those friendships that you form off the pitch are ultimately at amateur level what pull you through. To get 7 bells of shit knocked out of you on a Saturday afternoon takes a lot, especially when you've got to then go and do a 9-to-5 job or a manual labour job the next week. If you're out there with 14 other of your best mates, it makes it that little bit easier, and it gives you again that important word, the drive to want to succeed. And I think that does stem from the social side. If you go back to talk about university rugby, the reason why we always performed was because we looked after each other and we were all a big group of friends. And it's the same at amateur rugby, in my opinion. You've got to want to play for each other, and that stems from a social side.
Would you say you have any advice for, let's say, there's a young coach out there that's probably had a similar sort of injury that means they can't play anymore? Would you have any piece of advice for them where they should start or anything like that?
Ask is the biggest one for me. I think I'm quite lucky because I'm confident, and I will go and ask people to join in, or I'll ask for their opinions, but it can be quite daunting. But what I've found is when you go and ask these questions, there's not many people that will turn around and say no. The rugby community is very accommodating. You've just got to have the confidence to go and put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and start somewhere. And whether that starts with the person who drops out the cones, it's somewhere, and just ask those questions. Get yourself involved in those circles. And it's surprising how quickly it catches speed.
Elliot, I've just sent you the Return to Rugby roadmap. Then I'm assuming that you've read over this. What's your thoughts overall?
I'm really pleased, to be honest. One of my biggest concerns in the community game was, we've basically spent the last 12 months without being able to play much rugby at all. And it's just nice to know that when that next step kicks in, we can get back on a pitch and we can do elements of our game. And I think what's important for clubs, or in my opinion, is even though when we go into those adapted rules, is that we keep those certain types of players on the pitch. So, you could play a pack that's full of back rowers because you're not going to be scrummaging, but how is that going to help you when the normal rules come back? So for me, that's a really important side. But ultimately, rugby's back, and that's the most important part. Because I think we were at a point where if we didn't get it back soon, that you were probably going to look at losing players because something else will take over.
My main worry as a player was this Return to Rugby roadmap coming in, and they were giving us like 2-3 weeks of training, then straight into games. Because as a player, you've got to think about yourself. So if you're I think it's been over a year since I last played, and if I have 2-3 weeks of training and go straight to a game, you're just going to see so many more injuries. So I guess.
That's one of the considerations we've had at Ormskirk is we know we need to do contact because, like I said, a lot of these players have had pretty much 12 months of no contact rugby, and that's a shock to anybody's system, no matter how good a player you are. So we've made a conservative effort in our planning to build that in, but at a gradual pace. So, we start at maybe a light contact session in the first couple of weeks. And then as we progress on through that roadmap, we will ramp it up. And I think what's really important for any club or any team is that you don't go head first into any full-blown contact rugby. You've got to bide your time. It's not, and again, these lads have got to go out and work Monday to Friday. It's no good if on Saturday they're ruined, and really no reason, just because you're not being patient enough.
So, summarising the roadmap and everything, where do you think grassroots rugby is heading at the moment, like in the next year, 5 years, 10 years?
I think it's really difficult to say because one of the things for me is I think a lot of lads will either go one or two ways now, and I'm specifically talking about seniors. They'll either think, actually, I quite like this time with my family, time with my girlfriend, time away from rugby, and I don't want to come back. Or on the other hand, they've spent that much time with the family or with the girlfriend or with the partner, that now all they want to do is get out of the house and go and, play rugby on a Saturday and get back on the beers. So I think it's going to go one or two ways. I'd be disappointed if we start to see clubs drop off because I think now, being locked down for pretty much the past 12 months, why would you not want rugby? Why would you not want to be able to do that? But ultimately, it is down to those players and whether they want to play.
Well, my main worry is when I was going through the junior age, under 14s and 15s, you'd see every age group and they'd be full of 25, 30 players. And now you look and some teams having to fold or they just haven't got enough. And I don't really know what's going wrong in that case.
To be totally honest, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, especially in the junior ages. There's a lot in the press, isn't there, at the minute in rugby about, tackling. What effect does tackling have? And if you've got your little son or your little daughter, do you want her to go and play a game if you don't know anything about that game and effectively walk into a situation where they're potentially going to get injured? Without an education side of the precautions that we take as coaches and we take as rugby clubs, you're not going to get that child to come. And that's where I think the barriers are, is knowing that we do everything that we can do to make the game safe. And actually, the benefits of the social side of playing rugby are invaluable. It's what I say to a lot of people. I've travelled luckily to a lot of places across the world, a lot of places across this country. And the one thing I know I can do is turn up at any rugby club across the country and I will end up with a group of friends. And for me, that's invaluable, as well as the benefits of playing an active sport. So, I think you need to weigh up those options, but clubs need to promote what's positive and what's really positive about rugby.
Yeah, well, Elliot, I've looked through the analytics of the channel and I've seen the age range of the viewers are 16 and older. I was wondering because there might be a few 16, 17-year-olds in an academy or Colts trying to transition to seniors. How would you give them encourage them to join? And obviously you'll be a bit apprehensive, but what's your advice?
Again, I think what we've done a lot of recently is, and especially back at Ashby where I had a little bit more of an involvement, is looking at how we can transition these players, because it's really difficult to bring an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old into a senior setup, which can be quite daunting. But what I find is a lot of players, once they get into that environment, they realise it's not as bad as what they initially first thought. And again, it goes a little bit back to the young coach. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you're not comfortable, go and speak to the people that you will be comfortable talking to about how you can ease yourself into that. And ultimately, that decision rests on that player, for me. If they're not comfortable to step up into that senior section, don't do it until you're ready. But if you don't do it, you'll miss out on some of the best years of your life, effectively.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I think one thing that I did wrong when I transitioned, I think I didn't throw myself in enough. I think I was just happy to be there because obviously when I first went to, and this is no criticism on the club, but there was a lot of, when I was in the second team in my first year seniors, a lot of people were forward, so I ended up getting pushed on the wing when I'm a forward, but I didn't really have the voice, I thought, to say some ways. If I probably did say something, they probably would have listened, I guess.
And I suppose again that goes back down to the coaching that you're receiving as well. You know, there is a massive responsibility on community coaches, especially ones that deal with, like you say, second team, Stephen, and it's having those conversations with young players to make sure that we know what they want. Like you say, if we see a lad that comes through and we're going to stick him on the wing and we've not had a conversation with him, how do we know he's happy there? You know, so I think that's a two-way thing. Yes,
Exactly.
yeah, yes, it is. You know, there is an emphasis on that player being able to speak up, but if they're never going to speak and the coach doesn't speak to them, probably going to lose them. So I think it's really important to have positive conversations with young players.
Yeah, Elliot, have you got any more questions on that before we move on to the quickfire round?
No, I think, well, my only question would be in terms of school rugby. I know in the news there's been a lot about taking aspects of the game away, especially in sort of like your secondary schools, which obviously different at club level. So I'm just wondering your opinion on that, really.
I completely disagree with it. I think for me, rugby, yeah, there are going to be elements that are dangerous. But if you play football, there are elements that are dangerous. You know, it's just because there's this stigma attached to rugby that you're going to get your back broken or your neck broken, that there's an issue there. Where the issue is, in my opinion, is that our PE teachers being coached to be able to coach rugby properly and safely? Are they having people coming in, if they can't deliver it, that can deliver that? If, you know, I know from my own experience of coaching juniors as well as seniors, as long as you have got the tools there to be able to coach effectively, it shouldn't matter because you know how to do it safely. And that's the most important thing to me. If you've got a confident, well-coached coach, there should be no issues, in my opinion. And you play the game as it should be played. Because ultimately, it's still a game for all sizes and all shapes. And let's face it, I was never going to be a footballer. So if rugby wasn't there, what would have I done?
Exactly, yeah. Elliot, do you want to start us off with the first question of the quickfire round?
Yeah, so I think we've touched on this, but best coach you've worked with?
So it's going to have to be the man upstairs, Paul Reed. Unbelievable. Just great ethos, great mentality. The stuff that you see coming through now from the RFU, a lot of it he was doing, 8 years ago.
Best rugby play, but like best player you've worked with, and you don't have to say me.
Definitely not you. Probably Lloyd Jones at Edge Hill. He's an unbelievable talent. One of my very good friends as well. But to coach him was a pleasure. He was just an animal, but in a good way.
Funniest rugby moment?
Going to have to stand back to when I was in the under-13s. I think it was under 13s. First year of where you kick at the posts. We were playing Obi Wiggs with Colville. We were winning up before the mercy limit at 50. Coach Paul Gadsby said, "Go on, Ben, have a kick at the posts." Line myself up, leather it, hit the poor guy who's charging it down square in the face. Poor fella.
I think because obviously Ben coached me at Ashby. I think we there was one moment on the pitch where I was going into a ruck, but I must have pulled out the worst ruck body position ever. Where it was almost like a starfish.
Yeah, it was like Patrick from SpongeBob.
It was so poor, but we still have the ball, so that's the main thing, I guess.
Yeah, because there was no
Go-to karaoke song?
Not 19 Forever by the Cortinas, all day.
I like it.
Favorite alcoholic drink?
Mojito, easily. It's
beautiful. Too quick.
Beautiful.
I was going to ask you something about like go-to takeaway, but I know you'll just go on about KFC gravy for the next hour, so I'll leave that one out.
Love gravy.
Yeah. So your future coaching aspirations?
It's a difficult one. That I know this is supposed to be quick fire because my dream job is to coach professional rugby. Always will be. Love it. But I suppose for me, it's just coaching in an environment where I can see players that want to, push themselves on. and that we've got something to play for. That I get a kick out of it. You know, that's all I need. So, and I suppose for me myself, I want to get a level 3 under my belt, and I just want to keep pushing my knowledge to the point where, you know, potentially looking at wanting to go over to New Zealand and doing like the IRANS courses, just to get a different perspective on rugby across the world. So yeah.
Like that.
If you were on the World Rugby Board, what one law would you change?
Or bring in.
Yeah.
It can be.
Or bring in?
So I think about this all the time, and for me, the one thing I would change about the game is dropping penalties from 3 points to 1. And it's not because I'm now up in the Northwest and love rugby league. It's more because I think it would just promote more attacking rugby, rather than, you know, kicking for the post all the time. You've got to almost go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Before we finish, I think we'll talk about Ormskirk a bit. Like, what are their aspirations for like the club? Where do they want to see them?
It's one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved. They are megally ambitious, and I love that. You know, and they are at the minute putting in place, you know, the infrastructures inside the club to be able to achieve that. The players are on board with what I've seen, and they've got the drive to be able to do that. So they want to be pushing up to be in a level 7 club easily, and then hopefully in maybe four seasons up to level 6. And I truly believe we can do it. We can do it. We've got the right mentality. We've got some very good talents in there. And the coaching setup around me is fantastic. So, yeah, that's where they're going. And what they've also got is a fantastic junior setup that's thriving. They've got a great women's side. And I think it's one of the things that they have on the fronts of the shirts is the one club mentality. And that is, for me, something that I want to be involved in. It shouldn't just all be about the senior side. It should be about everyone. And they've got that nailed. It's brilliant. The playing is the easy bit.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite obvious that you have a massive passion for coaching. So obviously it's been a really interesting chat. So thank you for joining us. I think we pretty much covered everything we can to talk about grassroots rugby for the time being. So Elliot, fancy wrapping us up?
Yeah. So thanks, Ben, for joining us today. And guys, we'll tune in next week when we'll have a new guest. Cheers.
Thanks, fellas.
Cheers.